I have been doing some work with RabbitMQ in my development and lab environment, and I want to set up TLS with that server for my testing. And I want to use a certificate issued by a certificate authority that's already trusted by everything. So for that, I'm going to use acme.sh to interact with a certificate authority using the Acme protocol, and it will fetch a certificate for me and take care of a lot of the management of that certificate. And then I'll use it with RabbitMQ inside of a Docker container. So here's my setup. I've got, on my LAN, I've got an internal DNS server that is where I'm asking for a certificate, or where the host name is going to be. So this is the host name that I want a certificate for. And over in AWS, I have this hosted zone and this hosted zone created. So what I'm going to do is use a special mode of acme.sh that will put the challenge content into a text record in this zone, and then I will, in advance, create a CNAME in this zone that points to it. And that way, I'll be able to get a certificate for a hostname without the issuer being able to make a DNS query of the actual internal DNS server. So here's a chunk of shell script for setting up. If we go to the releases page, 3.05 is current. I will click this and download it. Now I've got a copy in my downloads folder. There are other ways to install this project. It's super easy to run their single line of installation. So it's possible to do this, but I'm more comfortable doing the installation from the distribution. So I'll run this. So it has created a directory in my home directory for it to put all of its stuff. And it modified my bash RC to add an alias for this. I don't need it, but that's what it has done. Now the AWS setup. So I've created an account, an IAM user in AWS, and it has a policy similar to this. This isn't the actual policy because it doesn't have the real hosted zone identifiers here. Those are something that you would plug in. But all that user has the ability to do is expressed here in this policy. So it's pretty safe for storing the credentials for this IAM user as a file. So with the actual key ID and secret key, I have created a file here in my .aws directory. That's where AWS CLI puts all of its stuff. So I created a subdirectory in there for users. And this, not that it matters, but this is the username for this IAM user. So this will be used later. I don't need to rerun this because it already exists. So here's the part where we pre-set up a CNAME that points from the hostname that a certificate is going to be issued for to the actual content, the TXT record in DNS that has the content of the challenge. So this is more instructional than operational. If I were going to use this over and over, I would implement this as a single script that accepted arguments. But I think this is good for illustrating how something works here. So I'm going to set these variables. And I can grab this chunk too. So this is going to read that file that contains the credentials for the AWS IAM user. And if I was using some other sub-zone, I could put that here. Like, for example, I have a mobile kit that I use that has a different zone, so it can exist on the same network, and I call it something other than internal. But if this is not necessary, then this can be a zero-length string, and then this won't be part of the fully qualified domain name. So I'm going to run this to set up my variables for the fully qualified domain name for the cert and the challenge. So at this point, we could inspect what those values are. So that looks right. And then here's my challenge hostname. So this is going to be the TXT record in DNS that contains the content provided through the ACME protocol to acme.sh. So this chunk is going to create some JSON that'll upsert that CNAME record into DNS. And it already exists, but I can just run this again. And this is what we expect, that the output is the content of the change. And it's pending. It'll take a moment. It's actually really quick. And so now I'll have a record. We can inspect that if we want using the AWS console here. So this is that zone where the content will be placed as a TXT record in this other hosted zone. Of course, it's not necessary to do this programmatically. One could enter this by hand in the console using ClickOps, but I think it's useful to be able to do this for an arbitrary hostname easily. Okay, carrying on. So now we want to actually do the request for issuing a certificate. And to renew, all that is necessary is to replace issue with renew. It will look at the existing files in that .acme.sh directory and perform the renewal. So this already exists, but I'll copy it anyway. And this already exists. And here's the part that actually uses the acme.sh script to issue the certificate. This is telling it which plugin to use, and I want to use DNS validation or verification for the AWS provider. There's a whole bunch of providers that are supported. So this is the part where we tell it which of the supported CAs we're going to use. And then here is the host name that we want a certificate for. And this is the challenge alias, which is special mode. There's actually a wiki page. If I open up resources, if we go to the documentation for DNS alias mode, this explains all the stuff that I have been talking about. It's good documentation on this project. So let's run it. There we go. It finished. So a certificate is issued and all the stuff is in this directory and in my home directory. So now we can use it. So this is the server name, and in my internal DNS, I have made this resolve to the same thing as the workstation I'm on now. It doesn't have to be, it could be somewhere else or whatever, but that is necessary because I'm running the Docker container on my workstation here. We'll also have the opportunity to mess with that host name to verify that the certificate is working correctly. So I'll set this up. Now I want to create a temporary directory to put RabbitMQ stuff into, and then I'll, down here for Docker, mount those into the container so that it can read the file. So I'm going to generate a chunk of RabbitMQ configuration. This content here will be placed as a configuration file for the RabbitMQ server to read. So this is the port that the SSL version of the daemon is going to listen on. The stock or plain daemon is at 5672, and 5671 is the convention that RabbitMQ uses for TLS ports. So I'm going to point to the new CA, the intermediate CA bundle, the new certificate that was issued, and the new key. So up here I'm defining where they exist inside of the acme.sh structure, and I'm going to copy those to this temporary directory and then reference those here in the RabbitMQ file. And I'm going to do the same thing for the management website, so I can take a look at that. And then I'm just running the RabbitMQ container off of Docker Hub so 3 is the major version, and dash management means that the management interface is included in this image here. So I can run all of this. Okay, that's good. So this is what we want to see, that it's listening. We can see that the management interface is listening there too. Let's check that out. So this is the management interface running the TLS certificate that was issued to us by Let's Encrypt just now, a moment ago. And this is what we expect. I didn't have to do anything special with my keychain and certificate store to be able to verify this certificate, which is nice. We can see the details of the server in here. For what it's worth, I could replace this short host name with my workstation's host name, and this is what we expect, right? That the host name doesn't match the certificate. So that's nice that that's working. So let's try running a test without TLS. We'll just connect to this host name and send a plain hello message into the exchange with a 0-length string as its identifier. And I'm going to create a queue called hello for that. Okay, that's good. So back in the management interface, I can see that there's now a new message in the hello queue. And if I switch this to a different host name, they resolve to the same IP. And since I'm not using TLS, this shouldn't matter at all. And it doesn't. So the message went through into this queue just fine. The client isn't using TLS, so it doesn't matter what the host name is. Here's another version of a connection test. So here I'm going to set up an SSL context first, and this constant means that the client should negotiate with the server for the best protocol that they both support. And I'm going to set a verify mode that certificate is required. So here I'm going to specify, this is going to be different for every OS, but I'm going to specify that my chain that contains the root certificates is here. So for Mac OS, at least the version I'm on, this is correct. I could have used the CA bundle that comes with curl or some other OpenSSL or whatever. Unfortunately, there's no default that just uses whatever is correct for the OS, so I had to specify it here. But that's going to have all the information necessary to verify the certificate that Let's Encrypt issued a moment ago. So here I'm using the non-default port. Up here I didn't specify a port in my planes, and it was using a default. But I'm not going to use the default here. I'm going to use the one that is already set up to use TLS. And then I'm going to send in my options. The rest is pretty much the same, except my message content is a little different. So let me send this now. That's good. We can check that it really shows up here. Good. Our message came through. We could inspect some messages, so I'm going to got our plain hello, another plain hello, and then a TLS hello. That's good. And I did the automatic ACK so that now our queue is empty. So let's try that same trick. This is the correct IP, or it resolves to the correct IP, but it's not going to match. And there we go. So our certificate didn't validate for the host name that we used, which is the correct behavior. And of course, our queue is still at 0 because it never got to the point of sending a message. So that's all that I have to show here using acme.sh and RabbitMQ. This could be used for any server, really, once you've got that key and certificate and the intermediate CA bundle. It can be used anywhere. So that's really flexible. The shell scripts could be used to make this automated, and you could even perform the renew on cron. It is built in to do that. I've created a repo for this demo content, and there's a resources page here that I showed briefly. It has some links that I think are useful. I hope that's helpful to you.